Skeezy Tookus is not the only one who gets names slapped on him just on account of how he looks. Names come Addie's way, too, only in her case it is because of her being so tall, in addition to the factor of her intelligence, both of which fall on the plus side of the ledger if you happen to be a boy, and are major liabilities if you were born into the world a girl. At least, that's my impression of how it goes in the dreaded middle school years. I will not speak for high school, having neither first-hand experience nor an older sibling to shed wisdom on the subject. As for Joe, well, he's been called more names than the world's most stinking umpire. He even gives himself names, although they are not bad ones, and would appear to arise out of a creative urge that runs deep in him. Joe is the most creative person I know. Too creative, for some people, and maybe that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that he acts more like a girl than a boy much of the time, and this makes people nervous, especially other boys. Joe figures he is who he is, and what's the big deal, and I figure he's right about that. Me, I've been called, amongst other things, pork chop, roly-poly, doughboy, and fluff. I hated that last one most of all. It was the name of choice back in 3rd grade when I ate peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwiches every day for lunch. Everybody called me Fluff that year. Or almost everybody. Not my best friends. And not the teachers. They called me Bobby or Robert, and they were all very nice to me that year, as if I had special needs. Which I guess I would have to say I did. But the way I figure is, who doesn't have special needs? Anyway, most of the kids called me Fluff, and I kept thinking, this is so stupid, because there's a lot more to me than half of what I put in a sandwich. Though I expect the name had more to do with the obvious results of eating nonstop marshmallow fluff than the fact of doing it. But still, I wonder if maybe everybody gets names hung on them for only a little part of who they are. Maybe even Killer Man. Kids who get called the worst names oftentimes find each other. That's how it was with us. Skeezy Tookus and Addie Carl and Joe Bunch and me. We call ourselves the Gang of 5. But there are only 4 of us. We do it to keep people on their toes, make them wonder. Or maybe we do it because we figure that there's one more kid out there who's going to need a gang to be a part of. A misfit, like us. Sometimes I'm sitting with Addie and Joe and Skeezy at lunch, at our table way off to the side and down at the end of the cafeteria, out of harm's way. And I get to thinking in a philosophical manner, and what I'm thinking is this. Maybe it's the rest of the whole 7th grade at Paintbrush Falls Middle School who are misfits. Maybe when they grow up and go out into the big wide world, they will see that Paintbrush Falls was the only place they could ever feel at home. Because the rest of the world is made up of people who were more like me and the rest of the Gang of 5, and Darryl Williams, who stutters, and you can see in his eyes how much it hurts just to try and say hello. Or that girl who moved here last year, and you can hardly tell she's breathing. She's so afraid of being noticed. But then she keeps drawing these amazing pictures that Mr. Minnelli says are touched by genius. In other words, people who are misfits because they're just who they are, instead of fits who are like everybody else. Anyway, I do not want you thinking that I or Addie or Joe or Skeezy feel sorry for ourselves. We do not. Other people may call us names or think we're weird or whatever, but that does not mean that we believe them. We may be misfits, but we're okay. Leastwise, in our own eyes we are, and that's all that really matters. Addie is the one who got us all together. Of course, Addie and I were actually together since before either of us can remember, because our moms were best friends when we were born, so we became best friends too. Then Joe moved in next door to Addie when we were 4. As for Skeezy, well, I didn't think he'd have any friends the way he was. In kindergarten, he got labeled a troublemaker right off the bat, and everybody just knew kind of to steer clear of him. At least you did if you didn't want a chunk of your hair cut off when you weren't looking, or a gob of paste shoved down your underpants. It was Addie who decided in the 2nd grade that what Skeezy needed was a friend. She sent him a secret valentine. It said, "I think you are nice, even if you act like a moron." Skeezy did not know what moron meant. He thought it was a compliment. So he announced in front of the whole class, "If whoever wrote this valentine tells me who they are, I will give them $1. Before Miss Haskell could shush the class and tell Skeezy he would do no such thing, Addie had her hand in the air and said, "I wrote it." Of course, so did every other kid in the class, because we all wanted the $1. But Addie proved she was telling the truth by providing a sample of her handwriting, and Miss Haskell believed her, and Skeezy believed her, and here's the part nobody could believe. He did not cut off any of her hair or paste any of her clothing to any of her body parts. He gave her the $1, and they became friends. From that day on, Skeezy stopped making trouble. Just like that, cold turkey. And even though he still acts a little tough and dresses like a fugitive from West Side Story, he is at heart the kind of person your mother wants you to be friends with. And all on account of Addie. Addie has always been like that. If she believes something, she does not keep it inside her head like private property with a no trespassing sign up. She puts it out there in the world and says, deal with it. She's not afraid of anything. Not even the names people call her. On Monday of the second week of school, she strikes again, this time in Miss Wyman's homeroom. Miss Wyman is a 7th grade math teacher. She is also a believer in the religion of self-esteem. Her room is plastered with these signs that say things like, today is the first day of the rest of your life. And, if you don't believe in yourself, who will? She keeps fresh flowers on her desk, and she likes to start each day with these deep yoga breaths so that we'll all be centered and at our best. She's so sweet sometimes you swear you can smell muffins baking. But here's the bad news about Miss Wyman. If you cross her, watch out. That smiley face of hers will fall off like a mask that's popped its elastic, and underneath is a dragon lady. And that, Miss Wyman, I swear, wouldn't blink at removing your liver with her bare hands and eating it with a spoon. So it is particularly nervy of Addie to do what she does, it being Miss Wyman's homeroom, only the second week of school and all. We will now stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Some 6th grade voice I do not recognize is giving the morning announcements over the PA. Miss Wyman looks mildly annoyed to have her morning yoga breaths interrupted, but she smiles indulgently at the box on the wall and says, boys and girls, please rise. We do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of... It is then that I notice that not all of us has risen. One of us is sitting with her hands folded on her desk and a new look for a new day resting comfortably on her face. Addie Carl, Miss Wyman says after the rest of us finish and sit down. Yes, Miss Wyman? Would you care to tell the class why you did not rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with us this morning? Yes, Miss Wyman. Addie takes a deep breath. I looked up the word pledge in the dictionary and it said furniture polish. Kevin Hennessy mutters. A bunch of boys around him laugh, Jimmy Lemon loudest of all. Miss Wyman furrows her brow. Continue, Addie. It said lots of things because the word pledge has multiple meanings, as many words do, but as best I could make out, the meaning that applied to the Pledge of Allegiance was this. She lifts a piece of paper from her desk and reads, Pledge, a promise or agreement by which one binds himself to do or forbear something. She clears her throat. Now, besides the fact that the dictionary is hopelessly sexist, and it should have said himself or herself, somebody says, here goes know-it-all. Addie presses on. Well, admittedly, what is pledged is allegiance or loyalty to one's country. But isn't there the implication of a promise of liberty and justice for all? And do we have liberty and justice for all in this country? I think not. She casts her eye on Deshaun Carter, who conveniently is sitting to her right, and even more conveniently is African American. Addie, Miss Wyman says, I think perhaps, did you happen to read this morning's New York Times? Addie continues. I make a mental note to tell Addie later about my liver-eating theory in regards to Miss Wyman and suggest that it might not be best to interrupt her. Well, my parents subscribe to the New York Times, Addie says, to the accompaniments of groans. And it's a good thing they do. Otherwise, I wouldn't know half of what's going on in the world. Have you seen what is happening in the unfair metropolis of New York? You cannot be a black man and walk down the streets of that city without the word guilty stamped on your forehead. The police arrest you, or worse, just because of the color of your skin. I do not call that liberty, and... Miss Wyman, I will not utter empty words, falsehoods, and lies. Addie walks to the front of the room and dramatically presents Miss Wyman with a piece of paper on which she's neatly penned her dictionary definition of the word pledge, along with the torn-out page of the newspaper. Returning to her seat, she says, "I rest my case." Sitting, she lets out a gigantic fart and turns bright red. Pretty much everybody cracks up. I am sticking the sharp point of my compass into my thumb to keep from laughing, because after all, Addie is one of my best friends. "Kevin Hennessy!" Miss Wyman exclaims. I'm sure she figures it is Kevin who put the whoopee cushion on Addie's chair because, statistically speaking, and statistics are Miss Wyman's raison d'etre, which is French for reason to be, in case not knowing what something means in another language gets in the way of your following the action. You'd have a pretty good bet that Kevin is guilty of just about anything that happens in this school. Anything of a subversive or out-and-out nasty nature, that is. Once Skeezy retired as school bad boy, Kevin took over the job. But I have the feeling it isn't Kevin this time. No, I have the feeling it is Addie's living, breathing symbol of social injustice who has placed the whoopee cushion on her chair. I mean, Deshaun Carter is laughing so hard, he is pretty near busting a gut.